All right, so chapter 5 is really a review of things that you should have learned in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Depending on your teacher, you may have seen this stuff a lot. Or your teacher may have skipped it or not had time to teach it to you. So a lot of this may be new information for you. The first thing that we're going to talk about is sample space. So the overall topic of chapter 5 is probability, which is really, to sum it up, it's what are the chances of something happening, whether it's flipping a coin or rolling a dice, or what are the chances that it's going to rain, or what's the chance that I randomly pick someone who is tall out of a group of students. Whatever it is, the probability is what are the chances of something happening, okay? And in 7th and 8th and 9th grade, you learned a lot of different things about probability that we're going to review in this chapter. So the first thing is sample space. So if I have an experiment that I'm doing, if I have a coin that I'm flipping and I'm rolling a 6-sided die, so I'm doing two different things. It wants to know how many possible outcomes are in the sample space, and it wants me to list them all, right? So I could flip a coin and get heads and roll a 1. I could also flip a coin and get heads and roll a 2. I could get heads and a 3. I could get heads and a 4. I could get heads and a 5. I could get heads and a 6. Or I could get tails and a 1, tails and a 2, tails and a 3, tails and a 4, tails and a 5, tails and a 6. Those are all the possible outcomes. And this is one way to list them. Some people like to draw little diagrams or tree charts. This is the way I prefer to do it, is just to make a list of all the different outcomes that you get. When it says how many are there, well, I just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this is called my sample space. All the different outcomes, that list is all the possible outcomes. It's called my sample space. The number of outcomes in this case was 12. And in 7th grade, you learned a shortcut. Instead of having to make this list, if all you care about is how many of them there are, you used the fundamental counting principle, which said, how many options do you get when you flip a coin? Well, I can either get heads or tails. So there's 2 results from flipping a coin. When I roll a 6-sided die, I could get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So my first event, there's 2 options. My second event, there's 6 options. If I multiply those together, I get 12. And you should have done that a lot in 7th grade. You should have done that talking about how many different ice creams you could make, how many different sandwiches, how many different outfits you could pick if you had 4 shirts, 3 shoes, and 6 different pairs of pants, right? So remember, this is the sample space, the list of all the outcomes, but you don't always need the list. Sometimes you just need to know how many of them there are, all right? So the next example says, find the number of possible outcomes and then list them. So if I flip 2 coins, my first coin could be heads and my second coin could be heads, or I could get heads and then tails. Or my first coin could be tails and then I could get a heads, or I could get tails, tails. So I have 4 possible outcomes, and those 4 outcomes make up my sample space, all right? You flip 2 coins and roll a 6-sided die. Okay, so now instead of just flipping 1, I'm flipping 2 coins. And on top of that, I'm rolling a 6-sided die. So I could get heads, heads, and a 1, heads, heads, and a 2. I could get heads, heads, and a 3, heads, heads, and a 4, heads, heads, and a 5, heads, heads, and a 6. I could also get heads, tails, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and a 4, and a 5, and a 6. I could also get tails first and then a heads, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and a 4, and a 5, and a 6. Or I could get tails, tails, and a 1, tails, tails, and a 2, tails, tails, and a 3. I know sometimes this feels a little bit tedious. And in some cases, this sample space is going to help you answer questions later. Sometimes you don't need the sample space. It just depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. All right. So there's all of my possible outcomes. And I could count them, or I could say my first coin could be heads or tails. So that's 2 options. My second coin could be heads or tails. That's 2 options. My third event is rolling a 6-sided die. There's 6 possibilities there. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 6 is 24, which is how many possible outcomes I get if I count all of those together. All right, as far as the homework goes, if you want to stop right now and turn to the homework, homework problems from 5.1, what we just did looks like number 3, number 4, and number 5 on the homework. You can stop right now, go ahead and do those 3 problems, or you can move on to the next video, keep taking notes, and do all of the problems at the end.